Okay, so welcome to episode 7 of the inventory tutorial series. Where we left off in the last episode, we got chest inventories working. So you see that as we play the game, we can walk around and pick up these objects. Then we can come over here and access our chests and put objects in the chests. We've got all the same functionality where we can split up all of our items. We can back out of the chests, pick up some more stuff, go over here, access this chest, put our items in the chest, back out, walk away, and, just as you'd expect it to work. So the one thing that's missing really is that the player doesn't have a backpack. We've only got the hotbar, and then that's it. We can't, once the hotbar's full, we can't pick up any more items. So the next thing I'm going to work on is giving the player a backpack. So when we press B, a similar panel to this will pop up. So we can put things from our hotbar into our backpack and then walk away and close it and carry on going about our business. And one thing that I want to add is the ability. So now once we pick up inventory items, it'll check the hotbar first, and if this is full, it'll move on and it'll check for a player inventory, and then it'll add themselves to that. And this will help solve another issue as well. So if I give this item a rigid body and then hit play, all that's happening with this pickup script is it's just looking for an inventory holder component. It's not looking for specifically a player. It's just looking for the chest. It's just looking for an inventory holder script, which a chest is. It does have the inventory holder script on it. So if there was a character walking around and they accidentally walked through the item, they'd pick up the item. You may only want it so it picks up the player, and there are a couple of ways we can solve for that. One of those is the fact that only the player has a rigid body. So if they were the only character in your game to use a rigid body, then it wouldn't go into the chest if something with a rigid body collided with it. Whereas if it collided with the player, it would. We could also check to make sure the thing that hits us is tagged with the player tag. That's one way of doing it. But because we're going to be doing a player inventory holder anyway, we can just make our item pickup look for the player script, not any other kind of inventory holder script. So let's just get started on that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to come over to our inventory scripts, and then we can right click, create C# script, and we'll just call this player inventory holder. So let's just open up this script in Visual Studio. So just like our chest inventory script, this is going to inherit from inventory holder. So inventory holder. I'm going to keep the update so I can listen out for a keyboard press. And for that, I'm going to want to use Unity engine.input system. And we'll look for when we press the B key. And I'll do that in just a second. The first thing we can get rid of the start function. And we just need to serialize a field and make a protected int backpack size. So on our inventory holder script, we've got our inventory system, which has an inventory size. And I might actually want to rename this. I'm going to double click, right click, rename. And I'm going to call this the primary inventory system. And I'll do the same for this, rename primary inventory system. So in our player inventory holder script, I can actually rename this to secondary inventory size. Oh. And we can have a serialized field protected inventory system. We can call this the secondary inventory system. And then we can have a public inventory system called secondary inventory system, which just returns that. And we need to override our awake function. So we've got private void awake. Let's just change this to a protected virtual void awake. So our protected virtual void awake, we're going to make our primary inventory system, but on our player system, we can do protected override awake, which calls the base awake, so that'll set up the primary inventory system. And then we can say secondary inventory system is equal to a new inventory system with our secondary inventory size. So we're going to use this event, this on dynamic inventory display requested, just like our chest does. And I'm going to listen out for the B key. So if keyboard.current .b key was pressed this frame, then we'll just call the on dynamic inventory display requested, and we'll invoke that and pass through the the secondary inventory system. So let's just hit save there and close this down. So we can go over to our player script, and instead of our inventory holder script, let's remove this and let's add in our new player inventory holder. And we give our primary inventory system, which is our hotbar in this case, 10. And our secondary inventory system, let's give it a size of 30. Let's just hit play. So we've got a error here, and it's because we need to reset our player hotbar needs a reference to our inventory holder. So now if we hit play, so that's all working. We've got our hotbar, that works. We can press B and it'll open up our backpack. We can pick up some more items. So you see at the moment, as we go over it, the items aren't adding themselves to our inventory backpack. They're staying on the ground. So that'll be the next thing we work on. So let's go back over to our inventory system script and back over to our inventory holder script. So in here on our player inventory holder, similar to our inventory system script, we're going to want a public bool add to inventory. And this is going to take in the same parameters as our inventory systems add to inventory method. So this is going to take in an inventory item data called data and an amount. So the first thing we'll do is when we pick up an item, we'll add it to our primary inventory system, which is our hotbar in this case. So add to inventory and pass in the data and the amount. And remember, this returns true or false depending on whether it was successful in adding it to it. So if it was successful, then let's just return true because it was successfully added to our hotbar. If it returns false, then let's try and add it to our secondary inventory system, passing in the data and the amount. And we can just return true if it manages to go into our backpack. And then we can just return false if that wasn't successful. So let's go back over to our script here. And what we're going to need to do now is we need to refactor very slightly the item script. So let's choose an item and we'll open up our item pickup script. So here, instead of saying get component inventory holder, we can just get component player inventory holder. And because this is a var, it doesn't matter, we don't need to make a new type, this still works. And then instead of saying primary inventory system dot add to inventory, we can just call add to inventory directly on our inventory holder. And that should just work as is. So let's go back into Unity and we'll hit play. So now as we go over, we'll see our backpack fills up with potato, our hotbar fills up with a potato, and then they start to go into our inventory. You'll notice though that they don't refresh while we go over it. We have to open up our backpack again. So let's solve that next. To do that, let's just go back over to our dynamic inventory display. And because this works in the same way as our static inventory display, where we make a new dictionary and pair up a UI slot with one of our system slots, we can subscribe to our inventory system method event on inventory slot changed. And where we want to do that is we can subscribe to it in our assign slot function. So underneath inventory to display, essentially we can do that in the refresh dynamic inventory where we assign our inventory system here. What we can then say is inventory system dot on inventory slot changed, and then just subscribe our update slot method to it. And just to remind ourselves, when that's called, it'll look through the slot dictionary, and if the system slot exists, then we'll update the UI slot for that UI element. So we can come back over to our dynamic inventory display, and we just want to make sure that this is valid first, otherwise we may get an error. So we can just say if inventory system is not equal to null, then let's subscribe to its on inventory slot changed event. Let's just copy this. And then when we close the panel with the escape key, we can call on disable, and we can just unsubscribe from the event. So let's hit save, go back over to Unity. So we can pick up all these potatoes, and you'll see that as they start to go into the inventory, they get, as if it's open while we walk over them, it fills up the inventory. And press escape and close that. We'll come over to our chest, put in the potatoes, and pick up some tomatoes, put them in there, and close that. You can see they're all still there. We haven't got any errors in our console log, and that's not filling up this panel because this is a different inventory system. So we can close that and open up our bag, and there's the tomato that just got picked up. So that was all working. That's a very simple little change, but that allows you to kind of carry on walking around with your bags open. So instead of having the backpack be a dynamic inventory system, you could set it up as a static inventory system. If you know that your backpack's never going to change throughout the game in terms of size, you could set it up obviously as a static system, just like the player hotbar, and then that would allow for, you know, positioning, say your backpack up here. Then you could redesign the inventory, the chest system to come over here. And you may want to move stuff from your backpack over to your inventory system. So what you could do there is if we go over to our dynamic inventory display, and then let's set the constraint count to 5 columns instead of 10, so it's not as long. It's like half the width. And let's anchor it to the right side of the screen. And we can drag over the X column so it's positioned kind of over here on the right hand side. Let's do 450, why not? So we know this is going to be the width of it. So let's just see what that looks like when we actually open it up. So we've got our dynamic inventory display there. So that was when I pressed B on the keyboard, it opened up that. We could probably move it up a bit as well. So now let's just Control D and copy this dynamic inventory, and let's rename this to player backpack. And again, make sure mouse object is at the bottom of the hierarchy so it appears above all of the elements. And let's go over to our inventory UI controller and open up this. And we need to copy this and rename it to like player backpack panel. We can just call this the chest panel instead. And actually I'll right click rename so it changes throughout the code, so chest panel. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to our player inventory holder script and then go through to our inventory holder script, and I'm just going to copy this action and go back to our player inventory holder script. And then down here, let's just say using Unity engine.events. So we can get a Unity action that passes in an inventory system. And I'm going to say on player backpack display requested. So on player backpack display requested. So it's a public static Unity action that passes in an inventory system, and it's called on player backpack display requested. And I'll copy this, and I'll just swap out that event, the on dynamic display, to the on player backpack display requested. Then we'll go back over to our inventory UI controller, and here we can say player inventory holder dot on player backpack requested, and we can plus equal, and I'll say display player backpack. Copy that. Unsubscribe for it on the on disable function. Let's copy this method, and we'll say display player backpack. And what I've done here is I've said display a player backpack, which isn't what we want. So let's just copy this back up so it's spelled exactly the same. And instead of chest panel, this is going to set the player backpack panel. And then again, we can copy this and say player backpack panel. So we'll close it if we press the escape key. So let's now minimize this and go back into Unity. We've got our player backpack, which is in the exact same place as our dynamic backpack. So let's now snap this over to the left-hand side. Put the anchor over the left-hand side, and we'll drag this across to the left of the screen. And I'll mirror the y-axis, so we'll just completely mirror this. So minus 450, and then our dynamic inventory is at, I'll say 115. Player backpack 115. So they're at the same sort of size and height now. So if we press play now, nothing happens, and I think that's because we need to go to our inventory UI controller and drag in our backpacks. So player backpack panel goes into the player backpack panel. Dynamic inventory can go into the chest panel. Is that what the issue was? Object reference not set. Yeah. And actually, let's duplicate this, and we'll do the same. We'll close the player backpack panel as well. And we hit play. See, now we can open our bags. That's going to come up on the left-hand side. We can pick up all of our items. They'll go into the player backpack. Then we can come over here, and we can open up a chest panel. So these are the two different chest panels, and our backpacks are still open, and we can move stuff from our backpack into the chests, and then we can close out of them, go back into the game. We can pick up the tomatoes off the ground. They've of course gone into our backpack, and then we can come over, we can open our chests, we can combine these items, we can split the stack actually and take two back out, come over here, open up this next panel, bring in our tomatoes here, take a couple of potatoes from our hotbar, put them in the small chest, exit out, take more out. So that's all working kind of as intended. So that's going to be it for this, for the initial kind of batch of videos of this series. If the series does well and it has a lot of interest and people actually watch it and want to see more, I do have some ideas of where I'd like to take it. I'd like to introduce an NPC that you can sell items to from your backpack, because obviously the NPC will need their own inventory system with a sell button that it'll check all the value of everything that you're trying to sell them, and then it'll give you that amount of gold back. So that's something I'd like to kind of do in the future if this series works and it's well responded to. I'm currently looking into kind of the best method to save the backpack system. So obviously this video doesn't tell you how to save and load, so if we go back and hit play, obviously everything resets. So I'm currently prototyping how I personally go about saving this inventory using JSON. So that'll be kind of an update to the series as well down the line if I can figure out that and get it in a concise way to pass that over. One very simple and easy way to do that is instead of our inventory system just being a normal class, this could be a scriptable object. So instead of adding on the inventory holder, creating a new inventory system here, what we could do is if the inventory system was a scriptable object like our items, you could have it so you could right click, create inventory system, and instead of inventory item, you could have an inventory like underneath it. You could create a new inventory, put its size in, and then assign that in our player holder script. Because the data in a scriptable object, if you change it, that's just how it is. It doesn't reset. So if I hit play, and if I come over to the potato and I set its gold size to 10, so for example, if this was a scriptable object and it was an inventory system, and I had loads of inventory items and I changed how many I had, when you stop playing, this data stays the same, and that works even when you build the project as well. So a kind of easy-ish way of saving your inventory systems is to go the scriptable object route. But because I know I do want to build a save load system anyway, I've gone for the kind of normal class route. So that'll be kind of an expansion, if you will, to this series, if that's what people want. If there's anything else specific that you want to see in an expansion to this course, let me know in the comments. As always, the project files for this entire course, including all of the scripts from each individual episode, I've exported each episode's script at the end of that episode. If you want to compare your script to what I've done, then come over to patreon.com/danposs and you can get access to them there if you support me on Patreon. If you want to discuss the course or get help with any kind of elements of this course or this episode in particular, then again, leave a comment below or join the Discord server, which is linked in the description. But in the meantime, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.